on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to the Jan Price Show, and today my guest is Maxine Trump, a filmmaker, and we're discussing her brand new documentary called To Kid or Not to Kid. Welcome to the show, Maxine.
Thank you so much, Jan. It's going to be really fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
It is going to be. I'm really looking forward to this. This rarely happens to me. Your publicist sent me the information about this movie, and immediately I emailed him back and said, I definitely want her on the show. I work with a lot of publicists in London, New York, and LA, and I'm sent things constantly about people wanting to be on the show, and I am choosy about who I have on the show. And as soon as I saw this, I said, I definitely want her because this topic is so timely. To kid or not to kid. So tell the audience a little bit about the background and how this documentary came about.
Yeah, well, Jan, it's really wonderful you say this because that response is pretty amazing and happens when people, in the same way, the reasoning really of making this film, when people hear about it and it touches them about making the decision of not having kids, or if they can't have kids and wrestling with that, they're so in and they're so desperate for the film and they so want to talk about it because there isn't anything out there like this. And that was why I made the film, because essentially it was me wrestling with my own decision. And what was going to be an essay film where I go around and I interview everybody and I find out their decisions. When I started cutting that film, it just didn't work. I have made a lot of documentaries before, and really to enable people to feel your film, you kind of have to show the emotions, be vulnerable, have that, the laughters, the tears, the cries. And so eventually I had to kind of, to use a very old-fashioned term, man up or have some courage and be brave and actually in the end put myself in front of the camera. Because after all, that really was what it was all about. And that now seems to have really resonated with a lot of people. We've been in film festival circuit now, and we're leading up to our release in theatres, which we're really excited about.
November 15th, right? It's going to be released.
Yeah,
very exciting. And we'll let people know more about that. You were very brave in this, and you showed yourself to be incredibly vulnerable because the opening scene is you showing your scars, your stomach scars. So do you want to share your story about when you were 15 years old and you had to have some surgeries?
Yeah, and I don't go, it's really interesting you talk about that, Jan, because I don't go into too much detail about that in the film. And as much as I open the film with really showing people this film's going deep. I never used to show my scars. I used to cover my body. I would never wear a bikini. I just didn't want people to know about what I'd been through. And it was a very traumatic experience. At the age of 15, I had a gangrenous fallopian tube. My womb was very, I was born with some strange, without going into too much detail, it just hadn't formed properly. So at the age of 15, had a terrible bleed and was rushed to hospital. And actually, they were really worried about would I make it. So that was sort of the beginning of my kind of puberty, really, and it was kind of super scary. So from a very young age, I knew it wouldn't be easy for me to have kids. But the reason I don't go too much further into that is that there was still the opportunity. I still could possibly have kids. And actually, my sister offered me her womb if I needed it, if I got to that point, which was lovely of her.
Yes, it was. That is very lovely. So what set you on this? Because I did not know that there was even a movement around this. I know, there are many women in the public eye, Gloria Steinem, Oprah Winfrey, many, 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 many women who have not had children. But you talk about the Prime Minister of England, Theresa May, and the Prime Minister of Australia also, who didn't have children, and they were vilified.
Absolutely.
That's just boggles my mind that because these women who are in powerful positions decide not to have children, I think that they're doing more for the world, serving in other capacities than they are perhaps being mothers. Is that what you felt too when you were going through the research on this?
Well, it's really interesting you phrase it like that, Jan, because there could be a controversy around that as well. I mean, I believe that. I think, and Angela Merkel actually is also child-free. So the fact that they put themselves into this public servant position has, maybe they can serve. And it gets very squirrely when we start talking about this, because obviously there's many, many women who have children that also serve in these positions and do fantastic jobs. But I know for me, making this decision, I know I could be happier, feeling less guilty. And if I'm brutally honest, let's just stay with happiness right now, because one of my decisions about not having children was actually what made me happy. And I love making documentaries, and I actually talk very early on about wanting to be in jungles, wanting to be in conflict zones, wanting to really be out there. And I didn't feel it was fair to put that on a child. I would be away a lot of the time, and I just didn't feel that I couldn't, I struggled with that, and I didn't want to have any guilt. And so I think it's fine that I knew what made me happy. And then it was like, okay, I know what makes me happy. Where do children feature in that? And do they feature in that?
Right.
So I hear you, and I think what these women can do is not have to struggle with their having to do it all, which is what I didn't want to do.
Right, and that was a big piece of publicity that was out there for many, many years that, hey, we can do it all. I don't know if we can do it all well. Let's put it that way. I think there's choices that are made. You choose perhaps if you are in the public eye and like many of these famous women are, and they have shows to do and whatnot. They have nannies taking care of their children. So, and the kids get to see them a little bit at night. And we've seen some of that, in other places, like even in movies, they'll portray the mothers, not being there, and somebody else is raising the children while they're out, doing what fulfills their soul. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think what is really important in this as well is that still the research shows how much, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, how much the mother still does.
Yes.
And that can be a real problem. The research still says that the woman is having to do it all, and it isn't 50% split. And I saw that again and again in relationships around me as well. And I have an amazing husband that basically promised me that he didn't mind the roles reversing. I could be the dad, and he could be, if we're really going down to basics now, he would be the mother and the wife and the looking after the kids more than me. And I just didn't think society would accept that yet. I didn't think they would allow me to be the one sitting in the deck chair with my beer, watching sport while he's running around
after the children. Well, back in the early 80s, the movie Mr. Mom came out with Michael Keaton, which is one of my favorites, and Terry Garr. And there's a new version coming out, actually. I forgot if there's a new TV series. Yeah, it's either going to be a movie or a TV series, something I just read, and there's a whole new version of Mr. Mom. And, there are men who have gone out there and done that role, certainly. I mean, there's no question about that. And you have, if you're going to be a highly successful woman, you need a man who could help support you in that endeavor. Listen, I have very, very, very dear friends who do not have children, and mostly because I couldn't. And they have the happiest marriages. The longest, happiest marriages are with my friends. And I always say that my friends who chose not to have children are happier. And I see that also when they become empty nesters. If the marriage has survived the children, and the children are finally gone, although they never seem to leave anymore. according to my friends, they are, happier because they can go travel and they can go do all the things that they didn't get to do and become closer as a couple because they don't have, always dealing with children constantly going on between them. So there's, pros and cons. I mean, there are some people that's what they live for. That's what they want.
Absolutely.
They've grown up and they want nothing more than to be a mother. Nothing wrong with that. But I think the choices, what shocked me, and I have to say this, you talk about Ohio male lawmakers want to make it mandatory to be mothers? Is that true?
So there's definitely some very, very interesting bills that are trying to be passed in this craziness of the abortion laws that is, spreading like wildfire around the country. There are some really unusual bills being introduced, and let's hope and pray to God that that's just deemed as a crazy mandate that a crazy lawmaker is trying to introduce. But that was one of the many bills that had been presented, and there's some weird ones out there.
And I'm sure you've discovered what they were and what states have them. Listen, China, I think, is, regulating that you can only have 2 children. I don't think the government should get involved in how many children we have or mandate that we must have children. I also don't get me into the abortion laws because we'll be into another tangent here. But anyhow, I don't want to get into that right now. That's not really what this topic's about. But the choice of being able to choose. But I was surprised by your film, To Kid or Not Kid, is that there's a shame involved with choosing not to have children. That was surprising in today's age.
And I agree with you. It's incredible with the fact that we're looking at 1 in 5, 1 in 6 women who will never have a child, whether it's through choice or by chance. And it's incredible with all of my research and my own individual experience, it isn't freely talked about. Now, it really is individual. Or, I've had a few people in New York where I'm based say, I've never felt any animosity. I felt very free. They're very, very vocal women. People very much early on in their lives would have known what they felt and were very sort of had no shame in any way talking about it very strongly. But that's more unusual, at least in what I've been finding with interviews. It seems it's much more, I lived in London. I worked for the BBC for a very long time. I emigrated to New York. I lived in Brooklyn. You'd think I wouldn't feel shame.
Right.
But I was made to feel I couldn't talk about it. That it was the odd choice. And actually, surprisingly, what's been a beautiful reaction is the amount of parents that have said to me afterwards, thank you for making this film. I feel I can truthfully talk about my journey. And that was a big surprise.
Interesting. Yeah. So I found it fascinating with the young woman in Swansea, Wales, who at age 25 wanted to have a tubal ligation, I believe, sterilization, and couldn't find a doctor to perform that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, a little bit more about that?
Yeah, she was one of these very aware young women, which there are, I'm so impressed with millennials and younger these days. They're so much switched on and more aware of themselves than I ever was at that age.
Yes.
And so I hear again and again and again, it's very, very, my social media is very active because people are really wanting this film, which is just wonderful for me. And I can hear time and time again of the young women that are so sure they don't want children. They're like absolutely certain. And, they could have a child at the age of 16, no problem at all, but no one will listen, or tattoos, or they can vote, or they can drive, or depending what country you're living in. But the thought of having permanent birth control, no one will take them seriously. And it happens again and again and again and again when you have really bad side effects from taking the pill, which actually is quite common.
Yes.
And again, the amount of hormones we're pumping into our bodies, it can make women very depressed. It can make women put on weight. It can make people lose their libido. And why should they go through all of that? For, all of their young up and, their birth, the period of time that they can actually give birth, up until sort of 40, from the age of puberty, they have to pump themselves with hormones when they don't want to have kids. It doesn't seem fair. And so this young woman had fought from a very young age. She's still fighting now. She's been fighting now for 8 years to be taken seriously. And I think she's on her 6th appointment. And no one will take her seriously, even though she has to take antidepressants because of the hormones. It's just like this vicious circle. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of heartbreaking because it's what she wants to do with her body. And, I know historically there's been difficulties with some nationalities, some communities with how forced sterilization has happened to some, in dreadful situations in prisons and certain countries. But, there's never been forced sterilization in the UK, as far as I know. I mean, somebody may be listening and go, hang on, Maxine, you don't know about this prisons, etc. And, I'll totally eat my words. There's definitely been forced sterilization, I know, in prisons in this country, or at least will offer you sterilization and maybe will limit your prison terms. I mean, it gets into very, very tricky territory. However, take all of that away, and that's me giving, a small amount of defense to these doctors. But if you're on, I've had these women say to me, I'm happy to go for psychotherapy. I'm happy to go to counseling therapy. I'm happy to take any test, just please, please, please listen to me. I'm happy to do anything, but just hear what I'm wanting. This is my body. I need permanent sterilization. I don't work well with IUDs. I don't work well with pills, etc., etc. So, I mean, that was very powerful for me because, I've managed to not get pregnant up to a later age, and what happens if she gets accidentally pregnant? It's heartbreaking.
Right, exactly. Especially when that's not what she wants, because she made a decision at a young age that she did not want to have any children. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is just absolutely fascinating. I'm talking to filmmaker Maxine Trump, and we're talking about her new documentary, To Kid or Not to Kid. I have a niece, and she decided at a young age that she doesn't want any children. Some people just know, as I say, you didn't get the mom gene. Some people have the mom gene and some people don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody needs to have children. And we have an overpopulation. The discussion about what is the impact of all these children are doing on our resources, in general. Yeah. And when you look at, further on down the road, we're overpopulated as it is. Yesterday, and this is airing much later, but it came out, a news report came out yesterday with a very famous actor who's in his 60s, and he married a much younger woman, and he's had 4 children with this wife, and he has a grown daughter from another marriage, and they had a miscarriage, so with their 5th child, and they just announced that they're going to have another baby. I mean, why? I mean, in your 60s and your wife's in her 30s, you're not going to see these kids really grow. I find it disturbing, actually, and that's, again, somebody trying to still show their virile at a later age in life. I don't know. Men are going to hate me after this.
Well, you are the perfect audience for this film because you get everything. Like, you're the person that's woken up and smelled the coffee and you get it. But let me tell you, the amount of people that do not get it is kind of immense. And hence, having this film, it was really funny. I try and have quite a lot of humor in my work because no one wants to go home and watch, a social issue documentary to relax,
Right.
There's definitely a number of laughable moments in the film, and we really tried to have some more sort of very honest situations in the film. But one thing we did do with our Kickstarter, when we ran our Kickstarter a few years ago, which was great, we did 2 things. We said to people, listen, if you're being pressurized to have children by your family, your co-workers, your friends, we'll send them an anonymous link to the film. Like, you just give us us the email address, and the film will just arrive in their inbox. You don't even need to know who it comes from. And then the other thing we did, but Kickstarter, unfortunately, and quite rightly so, they were like, we can't actually give away surgery, but we were offering a free voucher for a vasectomy as well. We had a doctor who was very, very kindly, So, got a really great talking, got that talked about. It was a fun aside because, after all, a lot of the film is centered around my choice and the other women in the film. But, let's be really honest here. There is a fantastic scene in the film, which I won't give away yet. Because, people should watch the film.
Right,
but
exactly.
How men take part in the process too. And I definitely do have men in the film talking about the issue as well. And once you start talking about it, it affects everybody, right? Everybody is making this or thinking about this decision at some stage in their life. It's not I either, like fishing or like painting or like, this affects everyone. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
It really is. And that is true. I mean, how many men decide whether they want to have children or not, too? Is that sort of, there's a father gene. Is there a father gene? I mean, some men just love being fathers, but I know a lot of men who never had children and are perfectly happy with that. And nobody vilifies them. Well, why haven't you had children?
Yeah.
Why didn't you have them?
But, again, the film is all about breaking myth. So why is it so curious that The Bachelor has this sort of positive connotations to it, but you say the word Binska and it has negative connotations to it? And why? It shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that way. And it's weird and strange. And, we talk about some of the history. Like I said, I didn't want this to be a dry film.
Right.
But we do touch, we go back to a woman in her 70s that had to make this decision. And we spend some time with her because she's just fantastic. And she talks about losing her job. And, it's just it's incredible. And you break open the shell and there's a lot that comes out on this subject.
Right. And I don't know if you just read recently, there was a woman who's 74 years old who never had any children and lives in India and did in vitro fertilization and just had twins. Why? Yeah. And overpopulation in India is huge. I mean, what I don't know they're going to not live that long. I mean, if they have, 20 years, it's a lot, but I don't even think they'll have that. So these poor children are going to be raised alone.
I love that, totally. And I love that you bring that up because we very successfully, Independent Lens, the PBS strand, actually commissioned me also to do a series on the same subject, which is going to come out at the same time. It's a digital series and it allows me to go to every different type of decision. So I have a woman who talks about how she stopped trying, which is a really difficult decision to make as well when you've been through the IVF, etc., and how she really felt pressure to keep trying. And when she wanted to stop, no one believed her. No one was like, oh, keep trying, it might still happen. It might still happen. And she was like, and it's a really, really strong episode because it's a debate series and she's sitting across from a man who did have a really long journey in deciding he thought he wanted kids, then actually realized he didn't want kids.
Oh, Maxine, I would love to talk to you further, but unfortunately we're out of time. I could talk to you for hours because this is a very fascinating topic and one that's not brought up very much. So thank you so much. The movie comes out on November 15th, To Kid or Not to Kid. So and please go see this movie. It's fascinating. It will stimulate a lot of conversation. So I thank you so much for being on the show.
And thank you, Jan, for the great conversation. It was so fun.
Great. I've loved it too. If you would like to listen to past shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com and all the shows are archived there. And you can also watch the Price Movie Minute movie reviews while you're there or listen to them. We have an audio version as well as a video version. Thank you for listening to the show.
on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.